All right, welcome back. Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark, GamecockCentral.com with our roster breakdown. We are running out of positions to talk about. We're almost done with these. We started these a couple months ago, and depending on what else has been going on, we do either a lot of them or then, we focus on some other stuff. We always come back to it because eventually we say we're going to break down the entire roster, and we are closing in on having done that. I think we maybe still have offensive line to do. But again, it all sort of runs together. We've been doing so many different lives and stuff on YouTube as well, Facebook lives, Instagram lives. So anyway, we haven't done, even though we talked about defensive backs, we haven't done our actual defensive back breakdown. And we had a long conversation about this on one of our YouTube lives, I think last week, but we're going to do it again. We're going to sort of put it all into perspective for you and talk about what to expect from South Carolina's defensive back position this year. The biggest question with this group, and this was posed on the YouTube live the other day, what's your best five? That's always sort of the question, I think, for South Carolina. It's not necessarily, creating a depth chart at each individual spots. It's more, who are your best five? Then if you have to remove one of those guys from the equation, who's your sixth best? And what configuration puts you in that position? Who's your seventh best? And so on and so forth. I think one of the interesting things for me, Chris, is that Muschamp said this spring that he felt like they actually were going to be able to run some true dime defense. And, what that basically means is that you're putting six defensive backs on the field at the same time. We really have not seen much, if any, of that for South Carolina since this, coaching staff has been here, just because there really has not been the depth to do that. I mean, there were times when, especially after injuries have hit them, there have been times the last couple of years where you're talking about, six guys playing the five spots, maybe in some cases five guys playing the five spots and just having to, play the entire game. So I think they do, even though there are questions, there are, some questions need to be answered. I think they feel pretty good overall about what they have coming back as far as starters and what they have to maybe fill in behind them. But if you're to talk about this position, you have to start with J.C. Horn. You have to start with Izzy Mukuamu. Those are the proven guys. And me personally, even though outside of the South Carolina program, they're maybe not quite in this conversation yet, or he's not quite in the – I throw Jamie Robinson in there as well. To me, in my eyes, what I think he's going to be this year, what I saw from him last year, to me, he's 100% a proven commodity. And I say that position, defensive backs in general, starts with those three guys. They're on the field somewhere, and then you sort of fill in around them.
Yeah, and to go to your point about Jamie, I mean, whether you talk to people outside the program, inside the program, or like around the SEC, you get the same answer, and that's Jamie's going to be really good, and he already showed some flashes of that. He was just a true freshman. And so the thought is he's going to get better and better starting with this season. And so there are some proven pieces this year. J.C. Horn is going to be really good. I think he's shown that. Now, does he have to take a step forward? Sure. But you feel really good about him at a corner spot. You feel good about Jamie Robinson either playing at nickel or safety. He can do either. So the key question, the first one is, does Izzy Mukuamu play corner or does he play safety? And so that begs another question of, and I don't know if I'm jumping the gun on where you were steering this, Wes, but, if you play Mukuamu at safety, which I still think is an intriguing option and one that the staff has not really made a secret of the fact that they'd sort of like to do that if they could, something that they've at least really thought about, right? And so what would allow them to do that is playing someone else at another corner spot, because then you shore up safety, which has been an issue, by playing Mukuamu there as a guy who's proven and has done some really good things. And then you also develop a young corner like a Johnny Dixon or a Cam Smith or somebody else. And then you can play R.J. Roderick. You can play Jamie Robinson at safety in situations. You can play Jalen Dickerson. So I sort of jumped in some of the guys that we're going to talk about, but I think what you do with the corner safety configuration is a big key to all this, what you do with everybody else.
Yeah, and it all there's a domino effect to all this. And yeah, I think that will be the first domino is Izzy. If Izzy's playing corner, then your corner spots are just locked down. It is what it is. J.C. Horn and Izzy McCormick are going to be your two starting cornerbacks. But then you have two very big questions at safety, I think, because that's assuming, if Jamie Robinson is playing nickel, then you're having to fill two safety spots there at that point. And Jamie can play both. And, could he play safety in the 4-3 and play the nickel back when they go to 5 DBs, obviously. And, I think there's a very real chance that could happen. But, I tend to think R.J. Roderick, especially if Izzy is at corner, then R.J. Roderick is going to be on the field somewhere. I think he's definitely on the field as a starter if Izzy is at corner. If Izzy's at safety, then maybe that becomes a question that rolls down to the question of where is Jalen Dickerson at now as a guy who had as much promise, frankly, probably as much hype within the program, and just as much excitement as anybody when he first got to South Carolina, and has just had injury after injury after injury pile up. And, this is the guy you want to talk about, wild cards at other positions and, questions at this position. To me, Jalen Dickerson is that wild card that if it all could just click for him and he could have that healthy year where he's back to his old self, then that would shore up a lot of things in this secondary.
It would. I mean, the injuries have just been – I can't even think of an adjective. Outrageous. I mean, just unfair, outrageous, whatever you want to say for Jalen. Because you're right. I mean, and it was fascinating because he was a guy that I still remember seeing him in camp that day in summer camp, and we found out it was Jalen Dickerson, and the staff absolutely loved him, and they nabbed a commitment from him. Not a super highly recruited guy, but when he was an early enrollee and he went through that spring, and the reviews were like alarmingly good about how good the staff thought he could be. I mean, they really loved what they saw, but then he had the injuries and then another and then another. Even when he played some as a true freshman in 2018, he wasn't ready because he hadn't been on the field a lot. And he also had, injury questions then, wasn't really fully healthy. He got injured in the Florida game again. Then he had something else come up last year. So everybody is sort of cautiously optimistic about Jalen because he has had the injury history, but if he can stay healthy, he's certainly got ability. R.J. Roderick has done some good things, but needs to become more consistent. Jamie Robinson's still young, needs to take a step forward, but the safety play is something that's really hurt South Carolina at times. And if they can get better there, I think that'd be a huge step. And that is one reason why I think, you definitely have to feel good about Johnny Dixon and or Cam Smith at corner to pull the trigger on moving McQuamu to safety. Maybe South Carolina looks at it and say, hey, we like Jamie and the other two guys here at safety, or we like Jamie at nickel and the other two at safety. We feel good enough about this to where leaving Izzy at corner is the best option. There's just a lot of moving parts there. But certainly shoring that position up, I think, is really going to be the top priority. And if they can have some young guys developed at all spots, maybe it makes the decision a little bit easier for them about how to proceed.
Well, I mean, let's even go back, man. Season opener last year against North Carolina. Johnny Dixon's in the starting lineup at corner.
Yeah.
And, Izzy was playing safety. So that I think tells us something about maybe in an ideal world, what this might look like. Now, Izzy obviously had a very productive year at corner, allows you to match up. Now, I think even if you move him to safety, quote, move him to safety, these guys are cross-trained all the time anyway. They're trained in concepts versus positions. So they know sort of what the role is for any given spot within the secondary. So if Izzy is a, quote, safety, but you're playing a team that has a six wide receiver, could you play matchups with him at corner based on, game to game? Absolutely. There's nothing that says you can't do that. So there is some, I think he brings some versatility there, maybe to match up a little bit against certain teams. But, Johnny Dixon, right off the bat, was a starter for South Carolina last year. And then I think maybe probably a consistency thing. It almost always is with young guys. But they wouldn't have put him out there game one if they didn't think there was a lot of talent, coming from him. Now, the fact that he sort of lost that starting spot means he just probably wasn't ready. And, but give a guy an entire year, learning the scheme, learning the system, just getting more comfortable, a year in a strength and conditioning program, a lot can change. I look at Cam Smith and also not to like put too much into something that was probably a small deal, but just watching some of the videos that South Carolina has put out. There was one where he was doing a quickness drill with Paul Jackson, and just you look at Cam Smith and the body movement at his size, the quickness for Cam Smith to be a really good cornerback is all there. We've seen that. I mean, that's another guy. We've seen Cam in camps, both like your regular summer camps at South Carolina. We've seen him in 7-on-7 camps. We've seen him in games. Obviously, we've seen the film. So Cam has always had ability. I think with Cam, it's about consistency as well. And, I think in high school, it was really about just not letting one play sort of bring him down. It was kind of about sort of staying that even kill throughout a game, throughout a drive, and just sort of being able to rely on his ability and not sort of getting almost too emotional at times, I think, in high school. So, but Cam and Johnny Dixon, these are both kids that when they were recruited, South Carolina extremely high on, and we kept watching last year trying to see, when does the light come on, so to speak, to where they start playing a little bit more. And it didn't ever necessarily happen last year, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen this year. And if that happens, then again, you're looking at it where you're saying, okay, this secondary actually has a chance to be really good.
Yeah, I mean, again, just going back to some young players, almost like a receiver, man, where there's some young players that have either played a little bit or not played at all that you're banking on to take a step forward to help your team. And maybe that happens. It's not as if you're looking at the roster and going, man, I just don't see that they need some guys to step up, but I don't see anybody who can do it. I don't see that here. I see a guy like in Jalen Dickerson who's just been injured a lot. I see Jamie Robinson who's going into his true sophomore year. I see Dixon who played a little last year. It will be a sophomore, so he played enough to burn his red shirt. And then Smith who played a tad and redshirted last year. But I see in all those guys ones that have ability to where if they develop and they progress. And my understanding, man, is they were happy with how Cam and Johnny were progressing in spring ball. They felt like they were making some strides, which is a positive. So then spring ball ended. So if you continue down that trajectory, down that road, that's going to help you both for the short term and for long term because, this is getting too far ahead, but they're definitely staring at losing JC early to the NFL after this season. And then they'll have some upperclassmen, so they need to develop some of these younger guys. But this season obviously is the priority, and having those guys step up would really be significant for them.
All right, let's talk younger guys right now. I think you have a couple guys that were already on campus for spring, and so we'll start there. Dominic Hill, O.D. Fortune. There was a little bit of confusion about who was playing where because we didn't really get to see much. We didn't get to see any like 11-on-11 or 7-on-7 or anything like that. And then there was some confusion in T-Rob's media availability. But so right now, or at least in this spring, Dominic Hill is a corner. O.D. Fortune is a safety. You have Joey Hunter, who is now on campus as well, that, I assume is maybe safety nickel. I think he was told corner was a possibility. I see him more as a safety nickel, but we'll see. And what do you think from these young guys? Who has the best chance to maybe come in and help?
Well, the thing about all those guys that you mentioned, Wes, I see some positional versatility with them, which isn't surprising. I always thought of Joey Hunter, for instance, as a guy that to me he looked a little bit more like a safety just with his size, but he showed that he can cover guys. He's not going to go out there and run at a 4-4, for example. But neither is probably Israel Mukuamu, for example, who's obviously a longer limb guy. He's physically developed. I think. And so it'll be really intriguing to watch his progression. A lot of people in Georgia were really high on his game out of high school. Fortune, I think, is going to need some time just because he's got to get bigger. I think he's got to get a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. But, he's a guy with a receiver background. He's long-limbed. He's pretty athletic. I think he's got good ball skills, so he's intriguing. I certainly think it'd be very good both for the short term, but even more for the future if he could develop pretty rapidly to give South Carolina another guy to feel good about. I don't know if you expect a ton from him early. Dominic Hill is really intriguing to me because, this is a guy who's, Orlando product who is long and he can run and he's got good ball skills. I think he really exploded when, he's only played DB full time for, I think, a couple of seasons. He was a receiver. He transitioned, I think, his junior year and just really blossomed and picked up a ton of offers. Nice recruiting win for South Carolina. So he's the one that I sort of point to that might have a little bit more short-term, potential for impact. But I don't know. I feel like Wes is probably more of the guys that we talked about at the beginning here who are going to play the biggest roles this season. I don't know if you're on the same page with me on that.
No, I think I am, unless there's always the caveat that, every year there's maybe a guy or two that just comes in and maybe exceeds everybody's expectations, sometimes even including the coaches. Let's talk about, just because this is who pops in my head, and because he just got a nice rookie deal with the Vikings, not even the same position, but remember DJ Wanham was sort of a little bit of an afterthought in that recruiting class. And then I still remember sitting there when Lance Thompson met with the media for one of the first times, DJ Wanham's freshman year, and was just like, guys, this kid carries himself like a professional from day one. He's going to push for playing time. There's always a chance that one freshman or two freshmen just come in and they just have the right mindset. They pick things up quickly and they play. And DB is a position, especially at corner. Now, safety in this scheme is not the easiest to learn. There's a lot on you mentally at safety. So if a guy comes in as a freshman and just, boom, can play that spot, that's impressive. But I think on paper, it's probably the guys we talked about. But is there always a chance that one of these freshmen comes in and just impresses everybody and blows everybody away and they say he's got to be on the field? That's always a chance. And if that happens, then that's a huge bonus, I think, for a secondary that that already has a chance to be pretty good. So, all right, we talked about, and we should have done this for receiver as well. We didn't. Where on the scale of like no worries whatsoever, that position's completely solidified, feel great as a 10. 1 is this is going to be the worst unit on the team and one of the worst units in the conference. Where is your South Carolina secondary 2020 concern scale at?
Man, that's a really good question. I think,
and it doesn't. I'm not saying you think that it's gonna be bad. I'm talking more like on what we know now, right now. If you were like the coaching staff, how concerned would you be? And with 10 being like you're just not really concerned at all. Like this position is in great standing, and 1 being we're screwed.
We're screwed. Coaches. I don't know. As you know, Wes, I'm terrible with scales and rating things. I feel like maybe like a 6 because I definitely wouldn't feel horrible about it. I definitely wouldn't be feeling great about it and just paying it no mind. You feel really good about J.C. Horn. I think you worry about the proven depth at corner if you lose a guy, definitely. But I think the questions of we've got to have, if I'm a coach, we've got to have a guy or guys at safety step forward. We got to develop more consistently. We've got to develop some young players. We got to have Jalen stay healthy. Got to have RJ become more consistent. Got to have Jamie take a step forward, right? Then I'm saying if you play Izzy at corner, how do you feel about safety? If you move him to safety, how do you feel about the young corners? I think that the sort of saving grace, so to speak, is you do have JC, you have Izzy, who's done some good things. You got some pieces, and you've got some young talent. But the fact that it isn't proven is something that maybe as a coach you lose sleep over, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not walking into this going, here's the starting five, and guess what? They're all conference. That's what you would need to go and walk in there with a 10. You'd have to have 5 guys who are returning starters, who are seniors or juniors, who are all conference, who are probably all going to the NFL, and then you got to have some guys behind them who are also really good. Like maybe some of Muschamp's Florida secondaries, for example, where like everybody got drafted. We can't look at this group right now and say that.
South Carolina's 2010 secondary.
Yeah. I mean, it's so. I think it's a moderate. I think it's sort of moderate right now. So that's why I'd go with maybe a 6 or so. I think that's probably a fair rating.
Yeah. Even that 2010 secondary? I remember, man, you went through, and I'm always reminded whenever you rewatch the South Carolina Alabama game from 2010, the starting lineup for that game. It's like Stephon Gilmore, Devontae Holloman, DJ Swearinger, Chris Culliver. It's just, was Antonio Allen in that bunch? Yeah, he would have been. It's just like NFL guy after NFL guy. But even that group struggled to come together, I think, there at the beginning at times. So, anyway, you never know. I was saying a 7 personally, a little bit, more positive about them. But yeah, there are still questions. And I think I think J.C. Horn has a huge year as a lockdown guy. And anytime you can count on that, at least one sort of lockdown guy, then add in Izzy who makes plays for you, you feel good. But like you said, the safety spot just has to get to a spot where it's more consistent. You feel consistently better about it. So, all right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for defensive backs. If you have questions, comments, concerns, throw them in the little comment section. Of course, ask any questions you have on GamecockCentral.com. And please hit the subscribe button here on the Gamecock Central YouTube. And, of course, come on over to GamecockCentral.com if you're not already a subscriber, and give us a shot. For Chris, I'm Wes. We'll talk to you next time.